Hey guys, welcome in. This is going to be the commentary for the very last video of the Summer of Arcade Summer Special 2023. This time we're going to be going and doing some commentary for Top Hunter. And this is a game that I just really did not expect to like as much as I did. I have a lot of things that I love about this game. I also have a lot of regrets about this game, and it doesn't even really revolve so much around the game. It revolves mostly around my method that I chose to play said game. So Top Hunter, like when I had gotten it out of the box, Top Hunter was actually in really good shape. I didn't have to do any repairs on it like I did with Shock Trooper Second Squad. I didn't have any issues porting it over to the emulator. It ran flawlessly right out of the box. All that jazz, you know, it was a very, very sound experience, you know, and it still is. Nothing's really changed. I think the thing that I kind of regret the most is the fact that I kind of chose to play it on an emulator. Now, normally I love emulation and stuff. Emulation is just amazing, you know, like it's really good in terms of preservation. You know, it's basically the only way that we're able to go and preserve our games, because after a while discs will rot, you know, cartridges will start to fall apart. So this is basically how we go about going and preserving basically what's there. And so I think that when it came down to playing this game, I was very, very happy with playing it, but at the same time, the problem that I have with emulation is that it can mimic hardware as well as software very well, but sometimes it doesn't always have like that authentic feel, and that kind of leads to issues later. So primarily when I would actually go and play these SNK games, a lot of the time what would happen is I would use my D-pad instead of a thumbstick. Like everybody's like, dude, the Odin has thumbsticks on it, just use the thumbsticks. But since these are largely 2D games, I would want to go and use a D-pad. And so what a lot of these games revolve around is just like an arcade stick, which is fine, you know, that's what they were built for and stuff. And so sometimes I think with games like this, you know, the weird thing that ends up happening is thumbstick does not always translate over to D-pad very well at all. And so there was like a lot of ways that I could have gone about doing this. A lot of people were like, you know, well, you can go and instead of treating it like an arcade, you can treat it like an AES. But I kind of look at the Neo Geo AES kind of like as an arcade, because it was basically just shrunk down arcade hardware. The only real difference with the AES is it had a controller that had, of course, all of the buttons, but they were no longer fanned out, and then it just had the standard D-pad. And so when I was going in and running Final Burn Neo, like it has an option to go and treat it like an AES title, and so I went ahead and I swapped it over to the AES functionality, and it just really, like, it wasn't like behaving badly per se, it was just being weird about it, I think. You know, like being weird about it in the sense of controls didn't really feel right. Like sometimes they would register, sometimes they wouldn't. And so going and working on this, I was just kind of saying to myself, okay, you know, this is a fun game, but it just doesn't really feel right. So in many ways I love emulation. I really, really adore what it brings to the field. And I respect it immensely for that, but sometimes you just cannot substitute real hardware. Now, me personally, I used to be a hardware snob. Like, I was easily one of those folks that would go and be like, you know, I've got the style of TV it's meant to be played on, I've got the console, and like all the doodads and stuff. You know, I was very much so gaming in that vein for a while when it came to retro gaming and stuff, and then what wound up happening, I think, is hardware eventually had started to rot. You know, like with hardware and stuff, the interesting thing about it is it doesn't last forever, you know. And so I had gone over and I had started moving over to emulation a fair bit, because I think at the time I was gaming on a Sega Dreamcast, and the laser in it just kept dying, and then the lasers were going and getting harder and harder to go and replace. And so after a while it gets kind of expensive. You know, like PlayStations are still relatively cheap. Like most retro consoles are relatively cheap. Some of them are very, very expensive. SNK's hardware is not cheap. It wasn't cheap back then, it is not cheap now. You know, and so a lot of the time what would wind up happening is the hardware would fail, I would go, and since you can't get new stock of really anything anymore, you're basically going and getting parts that already have like an extremely limited lifespan. So I would go, I would get the part, I would install it myself, not have issues, and then like a year later, it would start cropping back up again. And after a while, I find it just kind of starts to eat a hole in your wallet. I find that once you replace the capacitors in the Genesis, it lasts and lasts. The SNES is solid. The NES is very solid. You know, the 32X is regrettable, but it's also solid. The Sega Saturn, my Sega Saturn is literally starting to go and show some kind of ridiculous signs of age in terms of laser rot. And so, like, in terms of hardware, it doesn't really last forever and stuff. Like, a lot of people seems to think it does. You know, they'll be like, oh, well, if I take good care of it, it'll last. And it's like, okay, well, if you take good care of it, it'll last longer, but it's not going to last forever. And so that was kind of the reckoning, I think, that I had with my retro hardware collection. And then later on down the line, what a lot of people don't realize is discs eventually do start to rot. And I don't mean rot like, you know, they go and like they physically fall apart. What winds up happening a lot of the time is they'll kind of develop this cloudy layer. And that's normally the resin separating. And so it looks, when your discs get to a point where they can't really be read very effectively anymore, they kind of get to a point where they look normal, but they just won't read, you know, and so you have to play around with it. You think to yourself, okay, maybe it's just dirty, you'll clean it, and then you'll go to run it again, it'll run for a little bit, and start having issues, so you'll assume that it's just a dirt issue, but what winds up happening is the disc starts to separate. You know, that resin eventually does go, and it does start to give out past a certain point, and so in many ways, when it comes to disc-based games, the ones that are still functioning probably aren't going to be functioning for very much longer, because we typically start to see this around the 25-30 year mark with CDs and stuff, because manufacturing just was not as good back then as it is today. Yeah, that's just kind of how that is. I don't really like it, but you know, it's just the reality of the situation. So with a lot of these realizations kind of hitting me, I had moved over to emulation. I still have some of my old consoles and stuff, and I still do game on them from time to time, but I'm not really gaming on them super heavy because I'm trying to make them last. And so I don't really ever like putting stress on them unless I have to, so like retro gaming for me on actual hardware has become kind of like a special occasion thing, as silly as that sounds. So I largely moved over to emulation and stuff, and I can go and I can hardcore game on all of these titles. Now I could just go and just bang it out and just have like a lot of fun with it, but I find that as my journeys through emulation continue, I find myself missing original hardware, because sometimes what winds up happening is it doesn't really feel similar. Like, it'll go and it'll look similar and like everything will be very, very close, but sometimes you just really can't beat a arcade stick in your hand, more or less. Like, you just can't beat that at all, and so it's really just one of those things, I think. And I kind of realized that with Top Hunter a bit. You know, like I was sitting down and filming it and stuff. Me and my godson were like going and taking turns going and playing the game, and he was having a blast with it. Like he loved it like a lot. You know, it's one of his staple games now. Like whenever he comes over, he always plays it. But it felt kind of weird because I couldn't really quite pin it at first. I was like, you know, like the AES just had like a D-pad and stuff, you know, is this an issue? Is that an issue? Blah, 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 blah. And so I would just go and I would try to figure it out, more or less, you know, and I was never really super satisfied. with some facets of emulation. Like, I love it, but there are some facets of it that I'm just not very satisfied with in terms of how some things behave. You know, and it just kind of, sometimes it's really good, sometimes it's really bad. Some games I absolutely refuse to play on an emulator, and that's because it just doesn't feel normal, per se. And so it's been one of those things, I think. You know, it's definitely been the journey. I think another thing that I really wanted to see out of Top Hunter, and I had this issue with other games as well. I don't really understand why the hell, you know, I thought that Top Hunter was going to be different in this regard. Is I would have really loved to have, like, my godson come in and do two-player with me. I think that would have been just, like, really, really, really nice. You know, but again, the Odin at the time just did not want to accommodate a Bluetooth controller whatsoever, and so, like, I had to give that up as well. You know, and I just kind of... I remember just kind of sitting there and saying to myself, you know, this leaves a fair bit to be desired and stuff, and, you know, I didn't really, like, there are some things with emulation that you do have to go and give up, and, or sometimes you have to give up things depending on the hardware platform you use. I mean, it was just kind of a hell of a thing, I think. It was definitely a hell of a thing. God, I was so damn bad at these boss fights. Sitting here watching this mess, and I'm just like, Jesus Christ, why did I film this? I do have those moments sometimes, you know, so like with gaming being a challenge for me and stuff, sometimes I go and, like, before I go and release like a commentary version of a video, as I go back and I watch it and stuff, I'll sit there and I'll say to myself, you know, is this really how bad this was and stuff? When you go and you have limitations, any progress feels great, right? But sometimes I do go back and I look at some of these games and I say to myself, oh, Jesus Christ, I need to get better at this. I really do. Yeah, I think I definitely could have been better at this if I would have put in, like, I don't know, 15 hours of training. This definitely would not be like this. I think looking back, like actually thinking about it now, I think looking back on the entire journey for the Summer of Arcade Summer Special that we went ahead and wound up releasing, I think I can look back at it fondly, like actually thinking about it now, because when I first started it, I realized I was going into a whole new territory. You know, like a whole new territory from like start to finish and stuff, and it was really odd because like I remember going and looking at the hardware and being like, okay, well if I go and I pick this thing up, you know, there's a good chance that I can go and do X, Y, Z, you know, all that jazz really, and I think that I had cold feet for a while when it all boils down to it, you know, like I was like really afraid of failure and stuff, and I kind of had to remind myself that the only real failure there is when you choose to actually stop trying. So looking back on it, I think that I can look back on this entire series very fondly because I got to try a bunch of new things. I had to learn how to do a bunch of other things. I learned how to, you know, fix things. Like the experience itself was actually very wild. And then the cool thing that kind of came out of this entire series is that I was able to go and take video production on the go. And, you know, like, I remember just kind of, like, sitting here and being like, hey, you know, I can literally go and take, I can do the same things that they do behind a PC or a Mac, and I can take it on the go and do it out in the field and then, you know, be reasonably satisfied with it. I think given the caveats of the hardware platform that I chose, I think that all these videos turned out really well for the most part. I would like to see where handhelds go from here in terms of like emulation and stuff, because the what is it, the AYN Odin actually kind of uses a little bit of a dated chipset in it. You know, like the chipset inside the Odin is actually kind of old, you know, and so what they did to bring it up to speed to get it to where it needs to be is they overclocked it and then put an active cooling solution on it with a little bit of thermal paste, a heatsink, and then of course a small little sport fan in the back. And so, you know, they were able to go and do something really, really cool with it, but at the same time, you know, going and looking at it and stuff, I'm very impressed with what they were able to do. But I think that I'm more interested in being able to see what they can do with modern chipsets. Like, I would love to see, because I rock a Pixel 6 Pro in terms of, you know, mobile phone that I use, and the GPU inside this thing is very monstrous. It pretty much runs everything. So it would be very interesting to see what we could do with a Tensor chipset with a little bit of an active cooling solution on it. I really think that we'd be able to do some interesting things with mobile emulation, given that. Now, I think the caveat behind it would be that the battery wouldn't last long, because it is a very power-hungry chipset. But I really want to see what newer handhelds can do. I'm very impressed with my Odin. I love what it can do. I think the price point was very, very nice for it and stuff, but I really want to see what I can do with beefier hardware, because it would be cool to run higher end emulation, maybe with better frames and stuff, because the Odin does have a lot of limitations that I had to work around to be able to do these videos, you know. And then I'd also like to see what doing a newer version of Android would be like, because I wouldn't have to use so much third-party middleware to actually go and be able to film and stuff, because it would have it would basically have video recording right out of the box. And I think that that would save me system resource in the long run as well, like really thinking about it now. I'm very happy with as far as this series got. The videos are not 100% perfect. Going back and watching a lot of them, you know, there's a little bit of judder here and there, but given what I was working with, how I was doing it, and everything else, I can say that I was actually very, very impressed with the end result. I just wish that I would have had a little bit more hardware at my disposal. I've even thought about going, because the chipset that the Razer handheld that Razer just released not that long ago is really beefy as well, and I'm actually really interested to see what I can do with that, you know. I think that this project has kind of sold me on the idea that emulation can be portable. For a while I kind of believed that in order to get good emulation you had to go and just be at home and, you know, X, Y, and Z, but no, you could actually get very good emulation to go. And I actually like that a fair bit, you know. I'm very happy with that. And I remember growing up as a kid, like, we couldn't really fathom the idea of taking our games to go. Like, we had Game Boy and stuff, and that's all well and good. You know, the Game Boy was a really nice platform. The Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Color were pretty cool as well, and then the Sega Game Gear was pretty awesome. But we didn't really have the capability of running full-size console games on it. You know, like, so in many ways, looking at how emulation has progressed and how mobile platforms have progressed to go and support that emulation, in many ways it kind of became a retro gamer's wet dream, which is very, very interesting and stuff. And I really love how far that it's come and stuff, because I remember that you had to be shackled to your house to enjoy games like this, and now you can go and leave the house, and you know, if I'm waiting on a doctor's appointment in public, I can literally go just pull out my Odin and then just go and game on it for like the 45 minutes I'm going to be waiting right then and there. And it's just really, really nice, I think. I would love to see better PS2 emulation. I'd love to see better GameCube emulation. You know, like I think that Google's chipset could probably do it, because GameCube runs flawlessly on my phone. On the Odin, it takes a lot of tweaking and tuning, because that gold chipset that it sports is like really, really old by like current standards and stuff. But it would be really interesting to see what it would, pardon me. It would be very, very interesting to see what we could do by taking a mobile chipset, like a high-end mobile chipset, cramming it in a mobile handheld, maybe putting a better display on it, and then going and saying, oh, okay, you know, we're gonna go ahead and, make a mobile handheld that kind of focuses around this. You know, we could go and stick RetroArch on it, and then load up some Daijisho and everything else. You know, we could do some interesting stuff with it. I'm kind of hoping within the next couple of generations that mobile emulation gets so good that we can actually maybe, hopefully, do flawless PS2, GameCube, and Xbox emulation. Like, I can do it on the Odin, but it's a lot of tweaking, a lot of tuning, and that's because I have to compensate for there not being a lot of super speedy hardware. Realistically, when I was going and doing this series, I had to stick within a certain sort of, well, not a sort of, but I had to stick within a certain bracket of generations. So with the Odin, basically, it more or less stops at Cube. You know, Cube and PS2. The PS2 emulator for it is really, really nice and stuff. I mean, the guy who made it is very sketchy, but the emulator itself is actually quite nice. With the Cube, there's a lot of tweaking and tuning that has to happen. You know, especially if you're going and using Dolphin MMJR and stuff. So I'm kind of hoping that with newer chipsets, we can have a little bit of a better hardware spec to be able to run everything up to Cube and Wii really, really well. Now, it does run Wii really, really well, but again, it requires like a lot of tweaking and tuning and stuff. I think with future handhelds, I would at least like to see it run all the way up to 3DS, Wii U, of course, Switch, because the Switch is a little bit of a weaker platform, and then maybe, hopefully, it would be nice to see like 360 games or maybe PS3. I think that 360 and PS3 would definitely be stretch goals because they were actually kind of beefy for the time and stuff, but it would be nice to see chipsets advance to a point where we could actually go and do these handhelds some justice with what all they could actually go and emulate on the go. You know, and then of course I'd have to stick with Android as an operating system, because most Android handhelds get amazing battery life on top of it. I know with my Odin, I typically get about 12 hours on it. And that's with like consistent playing. Now, if I go and emulate, I want to say PS2 and GameCube, I'm going to be getting 9, sometimes 10. But I would like to see like a lot of these platforms just go in advance and stuff to be able to handle all this stuff really well. It's just way too cool being able to go and stick a lot of this in my pocket and stuff and then just take it with me. You know, I'm actually really grateful that, you know, we have that option now as gamers, because if I didn't have the option to take any of these games on the go, none of these videos would be happening, because with the old line of Blind Gamer Long Plays, basically I was tethered to a Macintosh, you know. And so I would go and I would spend a long amount of time in the room, and I would go and play and record and, you know, just do everything right there. But in many ways, I think that going and being able to take the games on the go is incredibly liberating, you know, because now I can just do it whenever, wherever, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. So, but You know, I feel it's a very exciting time to be a retro gamer and stuff. I know people are excited about new games and shit, but, you know, new games can go and suck one. Like, these old games are still great. And the funny thing is newer games are doing so badly currently that retro games have officially become a threat, which I think is kind of funny to a certain extent. I believe that it was a colleague of mine the other day. We were sitting down in Discord and we were talking about it, because I'm the resident retro gamer for the group and stuff, and he had made the comment, he goes, yeah, he's like, nobody really wants to buy new games anymore when there's so many amazing old games out there that cost next to nothing and that, you know, you can go and get relatively easily. And I think that he's right to a certain extent. You know, people don't want to deal with the bullshit that modern gaming has to offer. And there's just way too many older games out there that are way too much fun. You know, and so I think it's just kind of funny a little bit. But to be honest with you, we're going to go ahead and talk shop for a little bit. I have no idea what to do after this last video. I know that I would like to continue going and making these videos. They're definitely going to be a seasonal thing, as usual. But I have no idea what platform I would like to do next. Part of me wants to do SNES games, part of me wants to go and do a Genesis line. Like, I have other things that I do want to play, but I'm not really sure what exactly I'm going to be reaching out for yet. I do know that I want to go and start looking at other retro handhelds and stuff with a better hardware spec. You know, the Odin will most likely be recycled out as part of a giveaway, or maybe I'll go ahead and give it to my godson since he loves this damn thing. You know, like, I do have other things that I want to do and stuff. You know, like, I had plenty of fun going and doing a Blind Gamer long plays for, like, PSX and stuff. Like, I loved it a fair bit. I enjoyed playing these SNK games and stuff. They were super fun. It was a hell of a learning experience. I would love to, at some point, go and do Sega Genesis or SNES, or a large portion of me wants to go and do Game Boy Advance, but the problem I have with that is it is the platform I'm working on, because Game Boy Advance games only really run correctly when the screen itself is pumping 60 Hz all the time. The screen that I have deviates a lot, so it creates like really bad audio issues. You know, I still plan on releasing clips as usual. You know, I don't do it as much anymore because I'm busy working on this, but you know, clips do happen. I'm not really sure where to take it from here. I know it's not the end. I just don't really know what platform I want to do next. And, you know, Game Boy would be nice. Game Boy Color would be great. NES would be great if I didn't suck so horribly at it. You know, like, NES games are fucking difficult. You know? There's just, like, a lot of things. I would love to do a Sega Dreamcast line at some point, or even like a Sega Saturn. Like, I'm really into like Sega stuff. I've always loved Sega stuff. Like, I like Nintendo too, but Sega was where it was at for me. I just enjoyed the games more, and then I also liked the controller more on top of it. It just felt better in my hand. You know. I know that at some point I would like to do, I'm still working on Dino Crisis as well as Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare. I do know that I need to put in time and effort to make those games happen. I have not given up on them. I am just taking a very long break because the frustration was huge. And I don't really like to work on things while I'm frustrated, you know. Like, I don't mind going and having something be challenging and stuff, but I don't want to be pissed while doing it. So I do have things that I am working on and stuff. I'm always updating the channel all the time, always doing various fixes for it and adding new things to it. The big thing for this year is, well, so far this year, is cutting the black boxes off the sides of the videos. These commentary videos are gonna have black boxes, tough shit, no one cares. You know, we got, what is it? We've got subtitles in the door. We've got captions in the door. You know, just so many big things already this year, you know, and we're barely halfway, well, we're not even halfway through it yet. You know, we're still chugging. You know, it's been a very lovely journey so far. I'm very content with what we have here. I do know at some point that I want to get some new art in the door. If anybody knows an artist that is willing to go and do some work and is willing to get paid very well, by all means, please let me know. Finding an artist is a real huge pain in the ass, and I hate it. I do know that I've got to do some more tweaking and tuning under the hood. When I had got Twitter squared away, the account is no longer, locked. I mean, it's just been one thing after another, and we've really just been going and banging it out, and I'm actually pretty happy about it. I don't regret any of it. I'm always looking to improve it all the time, I think. I mean, yeah, it may be my hobby. I may not be making money off of it or have a desire to, but it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be done well. Thinking about it just kind of puts a giant wide smile on my face. But I have decided, after a lot of talks and stuff, I have, with my fiance, I've decided that a lot of these lines are going to be seasonal. Here's why. At first I thought, when I had started YouTube and stuff, that I would just be able to endlessly crank it out. And, it's a nice concept, it's not very realistic, however. So, what I've decided to do is I've decided to make my content seasonal. And what I mean by that is, I'm basically going to go through extended periods where I go and make content, and then a couple months off, and then more content. And the reason why I want to do this going forward is because, it's because of a couple things, really. First off, I do not want to get burnt out doing this. I found that when I was just relentlessly cranking shit out in extended stints, that I would get burnt out very, very quickly, and I didn't really care for that too much. I still enjoyed it, but the problem is when you do it endlessly, it starts to look like work after a while, and that's really not that great. And then the other thing, there's a couple of issues that I had. A lot of people would be like, hey, when is this going to be released? You said this is, heading out the door. When is it going to be released? I had experienced a lot of grief with this, with Dino Crisis, as well as Alone in the Dark. And so, with Dino Crisis and Alone in the Dark, basically what happened was my mouth overrode my ass, is really what it boiled down to. And so, what ended up happening was I was like, okay, this is going to be easy, because I remember back in the day I could run Dino Crisis very easily and then run Alone in the Dark very easily, but the thing that's changed is my vision is practically non-existent. So as an end result, the difficulty of it has changed. And so the reason why I'm doing it in a series style format is because I want to be able to sit there and say, hey, if I ever do announce it, it's going to be when it's damn close to being done, more or less. And so the reason for that is I don't want people to be like, hey, where is it at? We're expecting this. I want to keep it seasonal because the time that I have off, it gives me time to go, plan it, figure out what works, what doesn't, and then that way, when I do get around to going and announcing it, when people say, hey, where's it at? I can just be like, you know what, man, it's going to be out of here in a month. Or maybe a couple of weeks, or, something. And so, that's pretty much the format that I have chosen for myself, more or less, because I want to be able to just go and do it in a stress-free fashion, more or less. And I feel like I can't really do that if I'm constantly cranking out a new video every week. Now, once the entire series is done, obviously you're going to be seeing a new video every week, because at that point it's already filmed and planned and everything else. And it's pretty much set in stone from there, but I feel like as a creator I need more time to actually think about what I do, because I want to be meaningful with what I make, more or less. And so a lot of people that do make content these days, they normally have this endless supply of stuff that, they can go and reference and everything else. But with me, that's not really the case. I go and I look at these games, and some of them I'm like, oh, hey, I want to do that. And then others, I go to play them and I'm like, ah, crap, I can't do this. So, with me going and playing games without any sort of real meaningful visual capacity, I feel like it has to be planned more. And so during my time off, I'm going to be going and doing a lot more planning. I'm going to be doing this with the Sega line, the SNES line, pretty much all of it. I have decided that I'm most likely going to start using other aids as well, like cheats if need be. You know, like infinite lives, health, things like that, because I want to go and be able to share the experience and stuff. I know that it's not going to be commonplace, but some games that I have tried to go and run Nightmare Creatures 1 and 2, for example, they, for some reason, are prone to going and instantly killing me whenever I try to run it through emulation. There was a woman that went ahead and mailed me her copy of Nightmare Creatures 2. She's like, you can have this. I'd love to see you make content out of it. The problem that I have is there is a real specific door that I walk through, that I have to walk through. It drains all of my health instantly and kills me. After some research, I went ahead and discovered that that batch of games is defective. So I do know that I want to continue doing the game at some point. You know, like I do have games I want to go and do, but I feel like I kind of need cheats in some of them because they have bugs and glitches and, you know, just like really hellacious fucking amounts of bullshit going on with them, but I still want to do them, you know. So that's really where I'm at with that, I think, and it just gives me a lot of food for thought, you know. And I'm sure it's going to piss some people off. You know, they're going to be like, boo! You're using cheats! You fucking suck! Boo! Like, I get it, okay? It's not lost on me by any means, but for me, I want to try to, if there are bugs in place, I want to try to make everything as accessible as possible. And I can't really do that if I'm constantly running into bugs. I mean, I can already barely see, you know. Like, I'm doing good just seeing shit that's like 2 feet in front of my face. I don't really have any desire to sit there and ask myself, is it a bug or is it a feature? I have no desire to Bethesda this shit. You know, so... But, yeah, that's pretty much what everything's looking like. You know, that's pretty much where we're at with a lot of things, and I'm just kind of going and changing and evolving, and it's very interesting because I'm actually learning a lot about these games, I'm learning a lot about emulation, and I'm learning a lot about myself, which is also really nice. So, with that thought in mind, there really isn't much left when it comes to Top Hunter. It's a lovely game. If you want to see the game in its regular entirety, you know, we do have the non-commentary version, but by the time this video rolls out, it will most likely have been released for about 3 months, maybe, thinking. So you're more than welcome to go and watch it. So, but with that thought in mind, thank you for hanging out. It's been a true fucking pleasure going and doing this series. I'm very happy that we were able to make it happen. And as always, until next time, please, by all means, be good to yourself and each other.